Hello y'all, hope you're all doing well. This is RJ here in Marietta, Georgia at Marietta Confederate Cemetery. Doing a quick walk through here. There are 3,000 Southern Americans who fought with the Confederacy that are buried here. It originally started out as a cemetery for those Confederate soldiers who died in a train wreck, and later was expanded a couple other times after that to include those who had died across different battlefields. The soldiers are buried according to state. So for example, you can see the markers here. It says the Confederate veterans who died at the soldiers' home in Georgia. This marker right here says. This one right here is the Florida section. Well, another thing I love is there's benches around here with inscriptions, information about this place. Here is a section for Louisiana. This monument marker up here, I think it was dedicated in, 1908. I was gonna go up here and read this to you. And there is a cannon off to the left that used to be part of the Georgia Military Institute. Later found services in the Confederacy. It was captured. It was used as a war trophy until 1910, until later brought here. So I'll go over there and share that with you here in just a moment. See a engraving of a Confederate battle flag here. For though conquered, they adore it. Love the cold hands that bore it. To the 3,000 soldiers in this cemetery from every southern state who fell on Georgia's soil in defense of Georgia rights and Georgia homes. They sleep the sleep of our noble slain, defeated yet without a stain, proudly and peacefully. To our Confederate dead, erected and dedicated by the Kennesaw Chapter United Daughters Confederacy, Marietta, Georgia, back in 1908. To our Cobb County soldiers, who so nobly illustrated Georgia on many a hard-won field, to those who died for a sacred cause, and to those who lived to win the nobler victory in times of peace. You see this very well landscaped here with these roses. Right here, there's two historical markers. This one says 3,000 Confederate dead from every southern state are buried in this cemetery. First established for soldiers killed in a railroad collision in 1863. It became the resting place for dead from nearby battlefields. You can read this here further. It speaks about the cannon that's just right over here. Here's a historical marker. Marietta Confederate Cemetery. This cemetery was established as a property once owned by the First Baptist Church of Marietta. And it speaks about how it was donated. And you can see right here what the scene looked like back in 1908, over a century ago. Speaks about Bill Yopper, an African-American drummer for the 14th Georgia Regiment. He was made a member of the Confederate Veterans before dying in 1936. See a nice little gazebo right through here. And this explains a little bit what I just mentioned. It says, this little cannon served as the Georgia Military Institute from 1852 to 1864. Then it went into the Confederate Army, was captured on Sherman's march to the sea in 1864 to 1865, and held as a trophy of war until 1910, when it was returned by the United States government to the Confederate Cemetery at Marietta, Georgia. And a little bit more information right here. Georgia Military Institute, 6-pounder bronze howitzer. Now let's continue on over here. I like how there are benches through here, and there's text. You can learn about what happened in this area and how the bodies were removed here and returned here, and the kind of circumstances and what happened. So for example, this right here, the cemetery showed neglect. Though the faithful women worked and did their best, but they could not keep the weeds and grass down. I remember how some of us, in our humiliation, would take a lunch and spend the day out there. And you can read more about it here, just more information. And little artifacts that are attached. You see the flag right here. You see the Second National stainless banner on top and the battle flag or the naval jack right underneath it. Another book right here that says, when I saw the flag, I was almost overcome with emotion, and I thought it was more beautiful than I had ever seen. This cemetery was the first place where the federal government allowed the Confederate flag to be flown. In 1898, due to Southern loyalty during the Spanish-American War, the War Department reportedly sent a letter said of Maddie Harris, telling her to fly her flag. We have no jurisdiction over Confederate cemeteries. I do love that comment right here. When I saw the flag, I was almost overcome with emotions. Proceeding over here to a relatively new statue that was placed here only about 10 years ago. They pick up the pace here. That is right here, Marietta Confederate Cemetery. The Confederate soldier, Deo Vindice. God is our vindicator. Taking a closer look here, you see the Seal of Confederacy with Deo Vindice, featuring General George Washington on the Seal of Confederacy. Lest we forget, our dead are never dead to us until we have forgotten them. So once again, our dead are never forgotten to us, are never dead to us until we have forgotten them. In honor of our Confederate heroes, this was erected back in 2014 As it says here on the side, in these hallowed grounds rest over 3,000 Southern heroes, and it lists the states. Once again, these are all buried by section, and there's little informational kind of little benches right here. You can see right here, this section over here is for those from Missouri and Maryland. You see this section right here is for Virginia. I'm gonna go out towards the entryway here. This is the Georgia. And so once in a while you'll see an individual marker like this one in memory of George Mann, who was killed at New Hope Church when he was 24 years old. I'm gonna pick up the pace here. Here's a reference to that drummer, Bill Yop, that I mentioned earlier. Once again, I could spend a lot more time in here. Now coming at the main entryway, the ladies. Hurrah for the ladies. They are the soul of the war, said an Alabama soldier to a kinsman. Representing the ladies who dedicated their time to burying the men and maintaining the graves. Jane Glover donated the parcel of land for the burials of soldiers killed at Chickamauga. Mary Green oversaw the return of Confederate bodies from North Georgia to this common burial ground. I'm gonna pick up the pace over here. There are some large stone displays that include the names of everyone they know that's buried here in this Confederate cemetery. So for example here, they did the best they could to separate them by state. So you see Virginia and Texas, Tennessee, South Carolina, North Carolina, Mississippi, Maryland, Missouri. And I love how there's this little history right here as well. Marietta Cemetery and these dates. You can read this. Starting with the first grave in 1863. Up to 1989, the last burial was an unknown soldier whose remains were unearthed at the site of the Battle of Cheatham Hill. The dead buried here fought at these battle sites. You can see these different battle sites here. States represented in Marietta Cemetery. This ground is designated to make the city of the dead a pleasant resort for the living. We petition your honorable body for a further appropriation to carry on the work. For between 2,000 and 3,000 bodies still remain uncared for on the battlefields where they fell, or in neglected corners and roadsides to be turned over by the plow, shared or trampled by the beasts of the field. That was an address from Miss Mary Green to the Georgia legislature. Over here is You see the flags of all the states represented here. This one right here is additional names from Georgia, Louisiana. More additional names right here, Alabama, Arkansas. There are names on the other sides too. See the cemetery off in the background. Garden of Heroes, the capital campaign donors. So thanks to all those donors who help make this possible. This is not a cemetery of graves, but a rare garden of heroes. What follows is a listing of the names of the known dead in the Marietta Confederate Cemetery. And you can see all these names on this wall and the other walls we just looked at, including Alabama and Arkansas, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, Louisiana, and of course all the other names that are over there on both sides. Over here is a reminder, this is Marietta Confederate Cemetery, established back in 1863. And one last look before we get ready to finish this up. This memorial right here in memory of the unknown soldiers buried in the Marietta Confederate Cemetery. All right, just a little bit quick run through today of Marietta Confederate Cemetery. Encourage you to stop by if you ever have a chance to come through. Glad to be able to see it for the first time myself today. It's been on my to-do list, bucket list for a long time. I could spend a lot more time. I wish I could read each of those little engravings and all those little books that I was sharing with you there. So take care, y'all. From Marietta, Georgia, Marietta Confederate Cemetery, just on the north side of Atlanta.